Hello everyone, welcome to the Talking Corner. If you're new here, this is a place where we talk about everything and anything upon you, the listener's request. I'm Crax, your host this morning, and today's topic is brought to you by David and Aaron. They want to know how I got into tarantula keeping and if they're a safe pet to keep. So let's get started. I'm dreading this. Tarantulas are generally not the most popular subject, but it is a requested subject, and again, the message of this channel is to talk about things that people want to listen to. So, how did I get into tarantula keeping? Well, this started way back in the day when I was a kid. The science, 4th grade science grade teacher kind of thing. I think it was in 3rd grade, actually. And we had a tarantula. I do not remember the name. I kind of remember what they look like, but I do not remember if it was a Phormictopus or if it was a Rosea. Cannot tell you. Both are big spiders. Both have similar features, and yeah. Well, let's put it this way. She taught us how to take care of a tarantula, and that stuck with me ever since I was a kid. She kept us engaged. We never got to touch the tarantula. She never took it out of the enclosure unless it was actually a full maintenance day, which she generally did after class. And yeah, she totally was very keen on not letting us touch. There was a no touch. She said they're to look but no touch pet. They're not a pet rock. These are living creatures that have fangs and hairs that will hurt, and it would make our day very, very bad if we decided to put our hands on them. So we did not touch. No touchy. So anyways, to keep us engaged though, what she had done was she had us come up and tell us what was wrong with the enclosure on certain days, on maintenance days. We would point out if there's mold, we'd take care of that. If there's mold, if there's mushrooms growing in there, fungi, if the water dish was empty, even right down to, is the hide getting a little too small? Should we put them in a bigger enclosure? And we got to watch her put this little cute thing in bigger enclosure. It was really fun, and the feeding. I can't tell you how many girls screamed. Some of the guys were like, "Oh, we're kids," but I was pretty fascinated by that, and it is fascinating to watch a tarantula eat. In my defense, if you don't believe me, look at all of the videos on YouTube. Practically all of them are feeding videos. So anyways, that's she got me interested into it, and I really appreciate her going through the extra mile to teach us kids, do not touch, take the responsibility of cleaning, take the responsibility of watering, take the responsibility of ensuring that you feed on certain days, keeping the routine. So I really, really appreciate what she went through for us. And so that's how I pretty much got started. My parents were absolutely against getting a tarantula, especially since I have other siblings who were terrified of them. That's a big no-no. They're not coming near. They're not going to come near a tarantula at all. So further on, when I got into the hobby, when I got old enough to on my own, and I decided to get my first tarantula, I looked up as much information as I could. What tarantula was right for me. What could I get? What could I afford? What kind of needs did they need? What in my house would be even a danger to them? So I'd come to discover there were over 1,200 documented species, which means that there's a lot of tarantulas out there. And, when you're getting into the hobby, that's almost overwhelming. That also brings up a lot of questions, various answers to those questions, like, what is the best tarantula for a beginner? Well, in my opinion, it's a toss between a Brachypelma albiceps or a Brachypelma or pteridocotyle. I'm sorry I butchered that name. they've just recently changed it. So, as I was saying, or Formictopus. Formictopus or Brachypelma. For me, I think Brachypelma albiceps is probably better. They're not as hot-headed as a Formictopus, but both are hardy eaters, hardy spiders, and if you get a female, they live quite a long life. So yes, I would definitely recommend one of those two, with keeping in mind you're not going to touch your spider, you're not going to mess with them, you're just going to look at them from afar. And so I stumbled about and I was trying to think, okay, these are the two different spiders that I wanted, because the reason why I wanted a Formictopus was because there was this beautiful Auratus that was just very bronzy, very metallic looking, and I was like, oh, I need that spider. I want that spider. I think he's so cool. And then you get into the albiceps at the Brachypelmas at the time, and there's one that's the curly hair. I'm not sure if they still call them Brachypelma. It might be Tarantuals. But anyways, again, just absolutely cute, fuzzy, but packs a lot of attitude, loves to eat. I wanted to see the eating. The eating is quite fascinating. So I set out to look for these tarantulas, and my first tarantula ended up not being either one of those. And I went the complete opposite end. I started backwards in my tarantula experience. I started off with a regalis, and I can already hear the screaming of, why the hell did you get a regalis for your first tarantula? Were you stupid? No. I got one under certain circumstances. My neighbor was moving in their, I think it was either a sister-in-law or sister, and they had a child, and that particular person they were moving in did not feel comfortable with their young kid around a bunch of tarantulas, so they were getting rid of their collection. Now, this is a person that was avid, and I mean avid. She was an avid collector of old worlds, and so she could not get rid of Elvira. Elvira was this very beautiful, large, gorgeous regalis who had a lot of attitude and a lot of punch. She was the type that if you did not knock to come in first, she was coming out with her fangs ready and her, in the threat pose with her legs ready to slap the crap out of you. So yes, she was extremely territorial, and that's just how this particular spider was. So she really could not give her spider, give this creature away to somebody who was just getting into the hobby. And then having me as a neighbor, and I was studying entomology at the time, and she goes, she would feel more comfortable giving her to me so she could come over and visit as much as she needed. And if I had absolutely any questions, I could just go straight to her. So again, the special circumstances. And I didn't just get handed a spider immediately and was told to be on my own. I was handed this beautiful little gift. And yes, Elvira was definitely a gift. She became my favorite, absolutely favorite of all time. She had this quirk about her. Once you brought her in, once you fed her, she would do this little happy dance. Now, if you own a tarantula, you would know what a happy dance is. A happy dance is when they lay down webbing to protect themselves from pests such as ants while they eat, so the food doesn't get stolen and they're not caught basically with their pants down. So predators, basically, in my opinion, it's a defense while you eat, or while they eat. So anyways, Elvira had this quirk about doing this little happy dance in the top of her cork bark, and then go down into her cork bark to eat quietly by herself and silently. So it was always kind of cool to watch her look so happy, having a mealworm or a cockroach, God forbid cockroach, I hate cockroaches, stuck between her fangs, and she was just, thank you. And then she would go down, and that was it. That was the end of it. If you didn't knock first, she was coming out like she had just been lit on fire. So you would knock a couple times, and if she still stood above her cork bark and you knocked, you knew you didn't open up that enclosure. I think it was kind of a sign of saying that she was either still sleeping, or she was distracted, or she was just in a bad mood in general. And so you just didn't push it. And so you would wait until she was in her cork bark, then you would knock, and again, if you opened it up, I would say most of the time she didn't come out. So you could do the spot cleaning and then change out a water dish, which had to be daily. This is a spider that was a neat freak from hell. And what I mean is, she used her water dish as a garbage disposal. Now, most of my spiders use their water dish as a garbage disposal, but this one literally, I think, went out of her way. Any of the moths that she didn't like, any of the leftovers, of course, went in there. There was sometimes I find it packed full of cocoa fiber because she's digging more and she's just shoving more in there. You know, I guess she didn't know where to put it, so she would put it right in the water. It's like, really, why? So she needed her dish cleaned out daily. This isn't when you have a tarantula. Most of the time you can get away with it between every 3 to 5 days and changing the water. Not her. She was straight up really into just making a mess of that water dish. And now it was, it had been super glued. The framing had been super glued onto the side on the upper part of her enclosure. So all you had to do was take the tweezers, so these long 30 centimeter tweezers, I think is what we had at the time. It could have been a little bit longer, it could have been a little shorter. And you could reach the cup, and you could lift it up and then off the frame, like a bird dish. If you ever see how a bird dish sits, and then you could, pull it out without putting your hands anywhere near that cork bark. But yeah, once I got the hang of it, and eventually I earned the right to keep a regalis. So yes, a regalis was my very first tarantula. Now, did she ever bite me? No, because I didn't give her the chance. I never made the scenario. My very first bite of a tarantula, oh my gosh, that was from a P. Metallica, and I was doing some work for my internship. And when you're working in the public eye, the enclosures have to look clean at all times. They cannot be messy. And we had a very avid director who was, I call her an avid director because she was almost always in our, around our, not just the enclosures, but the displays, ensuring to make sure they were clean and make sure that they were on point and ready for the public. And so I had this Metallica who had lived in a small communal, and the rest would go into the cork bark, and I think she was more like a dominant female. Not sure if that could even be possible, but she would always linger around the top of the cork bark, part of the fake tree that was part of the display. And yeah, she had a nasty little attitude. And at this point, I was kind of in a rush. Again, if you ever get bit by a tarantula, it's your fault. I will never, ever, ever blame the spider. You being a dumbass, whether you're paying attention or you're in a hurry, you decided to open up your enclosure rather too fast. You're not seeing where your little one is first before you open that enclosure. Again, a bite could always be avoided. Even when you're breeding, and if you stick your hand in between the two to keep the female from killing the male, again, that is your fault. You've essentially interrupted what nature would be befitting. I mean, yeah, it's a sad part of life, but yeah, it's a way of life for most tarantulas, especially if they're a boy. But again, you did it. Do not blame the spider. So, anyways, I taken the toothbrush and I started cleaning the wood part of the cork bark of this little fake tree that was made of cork bark, let me put it that way. And a friend of mine had called my name, and so I turned my head, and just briefly, and I mean just briefly, I answered them, and I turned back, and she, in that brief of time, she went from just way over in the corner to hovering over my hand. Now, I overreacted, I jerked back, and that must have really startled her, because she smacked me with her fangs. Now, let me tell you, that was the worst mistake of my life. So I think I did pretty good if a P. metallica is my worst mistake of my life. No, all jokes aside, it was a very bad decision. Again, my fault. But did it discourage me from having tarantulas? No. Was it deadly? No. Let me tell you. Tarantulas, there is no documented tarantula or deadly tarantula bite. And that is a fact. So, are they a safe pet to keep? Well, it depends on the species and what you're looking for. But are you going to die? No. Is your kid going to die from a reaction to the bite? No. Whether it even be old world or new world. Just old world, they're going to be in a world of hurt, and medical assistance might be needed. I would highly recommend taking a child if a child gets bit by an old world. Take them right to the hospital. Don't even hesitate. But the chances of your child kicking the bucket, really, 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 really slim. Now, what might cause some serious problems is an allergic reaction. I'm hypersensitive to venom, not to the point where I need an EpiPen, but enough to where I would have to go to the hospital if it's an old world. Even my little sazamai, just recently when I got bit, swelled up my thumb to the point where it looked like a little golf ball, and I couldn't bend my thumb. And it hurt like hell. It itched like hell too. But again, my arm turned into this thing of hives, and after an hour, the hives went down, but I still had this really red, swollen thumb. So again, the worst thing I think you would have to worry about in any tarantula bite is the allergic reaction, and can you handle it? And again, if your child gets bit, go right to the hospital. I wouldn't even joke around. The pain that will be surging through them is no joke. And then you have to reevaluate, how did your little one get bit and why? So again, all bites are human error. It's the tarantula's fault. Now I've discussed briefly how I got started in the tarantula hobby, and are they a safe pet to keep? In general, yes, they are a safe pet to keep. They're not fun for your pets. Definitely, if your pet gets bit, rush them to the vet. Do not hesitate. You do not know how they're going to react. I don't know how they're going to react. I'm not that experienced. I studied insects. I did not study arachnology. I did not study arachnids. I should have. I definitely would not be sitting here. I'd probably be in some other country studying. But I think that covers just about everything. Let me put this out there. If you are getting into the hobby, first of all, remember they're a look but don't touch animal. They do not get along with cats. Cats are detrimental to them. So I would highly recommend not letting them loose or let them be around each other without supervision. And I'm talking about the enclosures. Again, a tarantula can die from a very short fall. They are not made to absorb the shock of that fall. They're made to walk long distances. They're not made to jump long distances. If you want, if you're not into buying the books, if you're not into taking the time to read or listen from an audiobook, go to YouTube. YouTube is an excellent source of information. Actually, I have a list here. You can look up Exotic Lairs, Tarantula Dan, The Dark Den, Mark's Tarantulas, Tarantula Haven, especially Tarantula Haven if you're into wanting to own a sling, which is the term for a baby tarantula. Tarantula Cat, she's actually really good when it comes to comparing one or the other, one species versus another species. And then if you're looking for specific needs or specific species and their needs, I would definitely check the Tarantula Collective. The host, whose name has escaped my mind at the very moment, is very articulate. And again, you can always find these guys on YouTube. They're family friendly. They're lighthearted in nature. Tarantula Collective can be a bit heavy on the mood a little bit. But he's got some good points he covers, such as a contingency plan. In other words, don't make your tarantula somebody else's responsibility if something happens to your house. Always have a backup plan. My backup plan is, well, it's going to be a storage shed that I'm going to have to heat, unfortunately, because everybody that I know is pretty much afraid of these little critters. So for my collection, I already have something in mind, and I have a temporary place to keep them, and that's my local pet store. And yeah, they said that they would be more than happy to help me in case of the worst case scenario. I just can't keep them there. And again, I'm not looking to make my spiders somebody else's responsibility during the worst case scenario. And so he gives you some good points, some food for thought. So I would definitely go check him out. I'm trying to think. Is there anything else to cover? Oh, yeah. One thing I forgot. I did mention Old World versus New World. If you don't know what an Old World versus New World is, let me explain. New World tarantulas, they come from North, South, and Central Americas. Their venom really does little harm to us humans. It's mainly just to target insects. But their main self-defense is urticating hairs, and I think I did already touch on that. Urticating hairs will definitely give you a bad day. Definitely for a few hours, you're gonna be suffering there. I mean, think about this. Back in the 40s, there was a popular comical prank, and that's called itching powder. Itching powder is just refined tarantula hair. It used to be. I think it's more synthetic now. But yeah, that should tell you something. And that stuff doesn't come off. If your hands are stuck with urticating hairs, I found that if you take duct tape, place it on the site that itches the most, and then rip it off really fast, yes, you're going to rip off some hairs, but the urticating hairs go along with it, and then some really warm water and wash your hands. For your eyes, don't rub your eyes. Please don't rub your eyes. That you can actually do more damage than good. You might actually scratch your retina. So what you could do at that point is just start washing your eyes out. So that goes to Old World. Old World are tarantulas from Asia, Africa, Australia, even Italy and Spain, even though that one's particularly harmless, and that's even up in the air whether it's a tarantula or not. And then India. Again, I know India is part of Asia, but they have specific tarantulas. I'm absolutely a huge fan, thus the regalis, and any of the pokies. Now, one thing I would love to touch on and give a shout out to, if you're looking into environmental means, please look at what's going on with the Pokiatherias. There are a couple species that are critically endangered, and one of them is one of the most beautiful spiders ever known to man. Now, mind you, they're not dying off, they're not deplenishing in the wild because of poaching or illegal pet trade. What's going on is there are huge deforestation areas of their homeland, and they're just losing their home and dying off. So definitely look into that if you have some extra time, maybe a little extra money you want to just throw to a good cause. You can go to the BTS, which is the British Tarantula Society, and they'll point you in the right direction for that. Now, Old World, again, we've covered this. Old World's venom is a bit more potent. It will definitely give you a bad day, a bad week, a bad month, even up to a year. So keep that in mind. When I got tagged by a P. metallica, I think it took about 4.5, almost 5 months for me to stop having random symptoms. And I'm talking about the cramp, the Charlie horse that just never goes away. Try that in your arm or your hand or your leg, or even your stomach. My stomach, man. I don't know how many times I threw up because my stomach was just like, nope, it would just tense. And it would flutter. My chest felt like somebody was stomping on my chest. It was these symptoms that randomly happened for about 5 months. So I think after about 5 months, between 4.5 to 5 months, it finally went away. Now, Old Worlds are, how do you know if you got an Old World? They don't have urticating hairs. They're not as fuzzy. Little Miss Fuzzy isn't Little Miss Fuzzy, she's Little Miss Colorful. If you notice something, they're a bit more colorful than by most, they're a bit more comfortable, or colorful than the New World. New World will always be huge. I can't tell you the size difference. It's like looking at Goliath versus David. I think my biggest, I have a Regalis now, and Elvira I think only reached up to 18 centimeters, maybe 17 centimeters. She was pretty good size, but she wasn't as big as many of the other species. I have Izzy now. Izzy's only 13 centimeters. I don't think he's going to get too much bigger. He is a confirmed baby boy, and he's quite the character. I really do love him. So there you go. That pretty much covers. Are they a safe pet? In my opinion, yes. They're not deadly. They're not going to hurt you. If you are planning on getting a tarantula, just do your homework. I can't stress that enough. Research. Don't stick sponges in the water dish. I'm pretty sure nobody does that anymore, but in case you do or think about it because of some old wives' tale, just don't do it. Nobody wants to chew on a sponge, and I'm pretty sure a tarantula doesn't want to chew on a sponge either. They don't want that bacteria. Don't use heat lamps, heat rocks, or heating pads that can cook your tarantula. They love the heat. I'm not gonna lie, they'll go right for it. So just be careful in that regard. Just don't do it. And then keep them in a quiet, safe, dark, warm, dry area. You want to be able to control the inside of their enclosure. Now, why would you want to get a tarantula? Come on now. Nothing beats the bragging rights of owning a spider that's bigger than your brother's girlfriend's teacup poodle. I'm sorry, it's just hilarious. All jokes aside, they're quiet, they're allergy friendly, they're affordable. The females live extra normal, just unbelievably long lives. Unlike the male counterparts, the male counterparts live between 1, 3, up to 5 years, and no more than that, where a female can live up to between 10 to 25 years, depending on the species. That's a lot to think about, and a lot of care and consideration that goes into just one particular pet. Not to mention they don't really take up that much space, unless, of course, they've got Giant or Goliath attached to the common name, and then you're looking at something that is going to be bigger than your brother's girlfriend's teacup poodle. You're looking at something that could possibly even grow up to the size of a dinner plate. Yeah. That's a pretty big spider, and they need a lot of room. So just take that in consideration. So anyways, thank you for listening, and like always, I will see you tomorrow.